That was kind of frustrating, the last one, too. It's hard doing this by phone.
It is. I could barely hear Stuart was saying. I couldn't make a word you say.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. This is Sarah with Mendocino County. We're going to get started. I'm here on behalf of Carmel Angelo, and I'll be facilitating this meeting. I'm going to hand it over to Amanda to do roll call. Okay, Amanda Ryman. Andy Bayowski. Arena Gotcha. Anne Marie Borges. Anna Perna. She's expected. Bill Gross. Brandy Moulton. Chris Garlington. Chris Girth. Corinne Powell. Dan Breck. Del Potter. Hannah Nelson.
Present.
Ivo Lopez. James Clear.
Yes.
Jay Brown. John Lindsay. Josh Abrams. Joshua Friedman. Jude Tillman. Julia Carrera. Karen Byers. Here. Kevin Shee. Kyle Oldman. Lauren Neerman. Linda Gray. Michael Golden. Nate Buttrick. Patrick Sellers. Paul Hansberry.
I'm here.
Petra Buchanan. Robert Delsman. Simone Evans. Stephen Golden. Stuart Marcus. Susan Tibbin.
Here.
Susan will be here shortly.
Tracy Peller. And Valerie Edwards. And then from the county, Arinder Graywell. Mary Lynn Hunt. And then Sarah Duquette.
Yep.
And Amanda Walter.
Wait a minute. Was that Mary Lynn saying she's here? She is. We're lucky to have her today. Oh, my God. It's like a bonus meeting.
I keep coming back like it's bad to me.
Is there anyone on the call that I did not name?
So you do seem more
Brent Powell.
and happy. No, she
Has she got you?
We had that organ I had to get out.
Oh.
I finished like 10 minutes ago. That's supposed to vocalize?
Yeah, here.
No, that's, but I have a question.
Sure.
Today's attendance is kind of striking,
Yeah, compared
or
to,
lack
yeah.
thereof, I should say. And I know a while back we had discussions in the working groups about participation and, show up or shut up kind of thing. And so I'm wondering how we might move forward with some policy about participation. Because at some point, I don't think it's worth, 4 people's staff time for 4 people's from the public's time either. I mean,
Well, there's more people on the phone, but yeah.
well,
There's
that's
3 people. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people.
no.
Well, I think for this one, I didn't realize that this Thursday was the first Thursday. When y'all sent that notice out yesterday, I was like, well, I guess that is the first. And I wonder if other people didn't get caught by surprise with that.
In the middle of harvest.
Yeah. The harvest, yeah.
Like a big festival.
It's hard to be here, but that's part of my concern, is that we had some 11th-hour complaints about process in the past that got supervisors' ears, and now here we are again, and I don't think we want to be vulnerable to that sort of Johnny-come-lately sense of inclusion.
Some people read the minutes.
I don't think people are hearing you, Stuart.
Oh.
You just sit over here, Stuart.
Yeah.
Microphone.
I can't even hear you over here.
So I throw that out as a consideration because I can also imagine
I'm not moving you over here, but that way we can hear you.
higher level county person might say, gee, these just aren't working. You guys have more important things to do. So I'm concerned about that.
Can I say something about that?
Who's that? Is that you, Hannah?
That's Hannah. Yeah. So first off, I share the same concern in part, but not because the Board of Supervisors would be disappointed in the reduction in participation, but more because actually the fewer there are of us, the more we can get done more efficiently. So to a certain extent, that's fine. But I would appreciate us having a policy about it, and I think that anybody can be excused for a meeting or two because things do happen. But I think what Corinne is saying is really, important. What I don't want is I don't want us to do good work and bust our butts and then have to start over explaining things that people are trying to catch up with later. And that's really the frustrating part. And everybody knew that, this is going to be the first Thursday of every month. I got thrown off about the date also because my calendar from the last time we were doing it automatically put it on the 5th of every month rather than the first Thursday of every month. But, I feel like we should have some policy with some allowable excuses, but really some kind of policy.
Well, what we can do, if you want, talk about a policy today and come up with some ideas. I'm gonna have to present to the board at one of the cannabis updates about that question number 2, items outside of the original scope that you want to address to get their blessing on. So if we want to add on some type of attendance policy to get their blessing on, I am open to that.
I think that would be great.
So do we want to just start with that then, go with the policy, then we'll tackle the survey results? So what are your ideas?
My suggestion is that there, aside from illness, there could be maybe, if it's only monthly meetings, maybe, 2 meetings a year that an unexcused absence, meaning not an illness, would be okay. Unless there's maybe advanced warning, like if somebody has a conflict because they have a planned vacation or something like that, and they submit notice to everybody, I'm going to be gone, and they take responsibility for reading the minutes of what happened and talking to maybe a co-working group member to catch up and understand that things have continued on, without them, that's my suggestion.
I would be inclined to see a little more based on consecutiveness. So if somebody were to miss 2 meetings consecutively and then not attend the third without any form of communication, then that would there be the cutoff. So
we can't hear you.
The idea is that it's more based on consecutive meetings. So they missed 2 meetings. At the third meeting, if they missed that without informing anyone on the county staff, then they'd be kind of dropped to inactive.
That's a great idea.
Corinne and Mary Lynn.
So this is Mary Lynn. I don't want to get in the position where staff has to say, oh, that's an excused absence, or that's not an excused absence. I mean, come on, we're all adults here. I like this idea of the 2 in a row and then the third year you're out. So regardless of what it is, unfortunately. I mean, it's just life.
Yeah. I agree.
Well, I think that this group will be ongoing, and that's my main concern. We're going to be addressing a lot of potential very important issues, and I would say 70% of the people on the roll call list have maybe been to 1 meeting in almost a year. So some of them should be on notice already. And I think maybe we should send out.
Well, this group's only met once, right?
Well, yeah, but all the time, and the state working groups, yeah. There are a lot of people who signed up originally and who never participated.
Yeah,
so
sure.
I think they need a simple note saying, do they wish to participate, or otherwise, if you don't hear from them, cross them off.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea with the 2 meetings, 3 meetings. So pretty much if you miss 3 meetings in a row without contacting the county, you are inactive.
And then what do you do when they show up in meetings? Who's going to throw them out?
You are.
I'm going to be gone.
Well,
Okay.
Can I refine that suggestion to include maybe not a mandatory thing, but a nice little be courteous of your fellow working group members if you have had to miss a meeting or 2, and understand that we can't always rehash the issues that we've already continued on with. So it's not a policy, it's not asking, telling them if this, then that, but in addition to spelling out whatever the policy is, that we also just say, hey, and also, if you do have to miss, could you please be aware that we can't really stop and go backwards to cover what we've already covered.
Stuart?
So I think that maybe, I don't agree with missing 2 meetings, maybe 3. But I think it should always be open to the public.
It has to be.
I think that maybe there could be an official subcommittee with voting members. And that if you miss 3 meetings, you no longer can vote unless you reapply or start it up again. So that this continuity is kind of saying that people voting and making decisions have to have some continuity.
I think that's a slippery slope. I was on a subcommittee, and we got removed at the last hour for the notice. So if you're not careful, you're going to set this up where selectively people can be removed. So if they're voting, really long skip or the long hair or whatever.
Well, I'm talking about specifically based on clear mathematical criteria.
Well, we had that also. Not attended. So I'm just saying, just be careful with what you ask.
We can't hear at all.
Stuart, you gotta move to the microphone. No one's ever gonna hear you on the phone. Yeah, come here. There's one here. We should sit on both sides of the table.
I'll just speak real.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
So obviously, this is going to be a decision that need to be made by the board and apply to all working groups equally. I think we're going to get really, you have a whole lot like, well, if this, then that, all kind of things. It gets really complicated, and I mean, all of these meetings are open to the public, and anyone can state their opinion, but it might just be, 3 months, you're just placed on the inactive list, so you're not going to be getting the same, maybe the same level of information, because they are public meetings. We do post, that they are on this date and this location. Yeah, they're always there. We have a whole page where all the taped meetings are and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, I think it's probably best to keep it simple as a recommendation, let the board kind of determine. Obviously, they're always going to be open public meetings, and they're always going to be, the recording is always going to be online. But I think simple probably best than voting and that's an
something. Sounds like the main issue is not having to rehash old issues when people show up after having missed the issue.
I was in the first
It should be limited. From what you just said, right?
Maybe we could send an email to the whole list, ask if anyone is ready to be removed because we've noticed they're not attending. Secondly, point out to them where the recordings of previous meetings exist as a reminder, because I don't know that everybody's tuned in on that, but that's the way to keep caught up. If they can't be on the phone, another reminder that you can phone it in and still be counted.
What we can do, that's probably pretty easy, but probably doesn't go to the board, is for all the working groups. We can send an email and say, please reply back by this date if you still like to participate. Because I know in the state requirements group, I don't know how many people we have on that list. I would say half of them I haven't seen in a year.
One, yeah. And then as a point of process on maybe to further this is that I do know that Sonoma County, San Francisco, the state, they all have advisory boards, is the equivalent. We could look and see what their requirements are to participate and see how they're handling it and see if there's some behavior that would apply to us. I always look to copy someone's work. You have to tweet.
Well, it's come up many times to the Board of Supervisors, so, and most of what applies to advisory boards are usually Brown Act compliant, so they're very different. And
I know there's a difference, but we may just see some behaviors within the description of their requirements that we thought could apply to this. I don't know. I can see that they're different structures, but I think a reminder about the existence of the recording will help people maybe stay more current.
But if the recordings are based on what's coming in on these microphones, like that's a tech issue that needs to be, as far as like having the recording be good recording. So I know when I called in.
We have the county for an update on our.
yeah, honestly, that's kind of the only option in the type of conference rooms we have is through the WebEx.
What about more microphones? Can maybe Daisy change in?
I have no idea. I don't handle any of that. And the reason why we're in this room and not our smaller room is we apparently have a bunch of people that participate, but obviously that's not the case. So if this is the size, we can go back to conference room A, which really fits about 14 people.
Yeah.
Maybe last time they decided that it wasn't really what they wanted.
Honestly, ideally, it's best when people are in person.
Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. You know?
Much better. Well, you can get more microphones for these.
Yeah,
So,
I will make a suggestion, but I don't do tech.
You don't, okay.
I don't order the stuff, but I can make.
Has anyone listened to the recordings online? I honestly haven't. And what, are you able to hear what happened?
Well, I do
You
listen.
can
In
get
fact,
an
we had
extension
was
so
the
it's
first
longer.
person who pointed out to me the importance of being, I was in Izzy last year, and Hannah was like, we have to stop letting people in because of continuity. So as soon as I was able to realize that there were the options of finding out what had come previous to my involvement, I went back and listened, and no, there is an issue with some of the recordings. You can't hear clearly some of the information, and you have to kind of piece it together because voices do drop off on the recording. So it's a hit or miss depending on the group, the size of the group, and who's talking. Like, I'm making an effort to project because of that issue, and I'm shy. So it's not always something I want to do, but the value of it is essential if you want to get an accurate assessment of what's being said by the individuals involved.
Yeah, see if there's a possibility of a tech request to improve our ability to share what we create here.
So the tables could get moved closer.
We could do that. We could get clever.
Well, we won't be here next time. I think we're going back to A because I'm not convinced 40 people want to participate in this group. So we're gonna go back to our old conference room.
Those are not good at reaching way out.
So maybe both.
Hey,
Yeah.
what if you ask for an RSVP for the next meeting?
A what? RSVP.
We have 12 people now, so it'd be easy to go over 14.
Yeah. That's the only reason why we moved from A to C is the enormous amount of feedback we got for people that wanted to participate, which hasn't actually happened.
Couldn't we just pull out 2 tables and move it closer if there's less people?
We could for today, if you want. Go for it.
I mean, like, that, I understand. Do you think, have you guys found that people do participate later? Did they come, or did, like, they drop off and then
They drop off, and most of the time they never return.
It's in a bit. Honestly, I have to wonder, looking at the survey results.
We had 12 people participate that day.
That's not good. After how many we had last time.
So probably all you people in this room.
I voted, I loved it. I'm like, why? Are you spaced it out?
So, and Dandy, I know.
I voted in the I didn't know. So what happened to all those people last time? I don't know. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
You did a good job.
Can't keep up with everything.
Well, what I was going to say about the survey results was that some of the businesses that put forth what they're, like, to me, it looks like this represents the community issues, not necessarily the larger businesses that were here issues. They didn't respond. That's probably.
Well, with that, we can move on to the first one, which is survey results, and I'll go over kind of what happened. So we sent out the surveys. We incorporated all the information that came from the first meeting. We had 12 participants. The way Survey Mountain View works is it will tabulate how many people responded at what ranking and put together the average to give you a score. And so I put in the scores of all of them for both question 1 and question 2. So a couple of these, I thought I'd make a few suggestions. One of them, language for the coastal zone, I think that should just be a standalone recommendation because there is a process beginning out. It's already begun, the process for the coastal amendment. So I think that can just be a standalone recommendation to include facilities in the larger effort that's underway. So we can almost kind of drop that off and just say we're going to make that a recommendation.
What number is that, Sarah?
14.
Thank you.
The last two, for manufacturers, I know there was some talk about it, but I wasn't quite sure if they were speaking directly to our ordinance or more the state.
So I can address
those
that.
Those are the bottom two.
I can address that. I believe that the state made clear the definition of ethanol and that they did allow the use of manufacturing level 1 and the use of ethanol. I think that what came up originally about that was at the Cannabis Advisory Committee at the state level. The advisory committee was suggesting that we make we make local jurisdictions aware of the fact that manufacturing didn't, even level 1 manufacturing didn't always include such massive equipment and stuff, and that if you're just using, other processes, it's not that, big of a deal. So I think that there were two separate parts to it. One was making sure that ethanol is okay, which I think our ordinance already does. And
yes, I believe it does too.
Yeah, and I'm not sure about the clear definition of ethanol or not. I haven't really looked at it recently, but the other issue having to do with manufacturing level 1 was just making sure that if it needs to be treated differently for little, and this is not specific to ethanol, but if like lesser manufacturing processes maybe warrant being treated differently in the rules about what is required. So, for example, if you're making bubble hash out of ice versus use of a CO2 converter, those are really different, even though they would both be level 1. It may be worth looking at our local ordinance to split it up into subtypes, because there may be more onerous requirements for a closed loop, CO2 system, even though it's still level 1, than there would be for bubble hash.
Okay, so I feel like some of this is relative to the state. There might be some remainder issues, but those did rank at the very bottom. So, and then we have
do you understand what I meant?
I understand, yes.
Okay, that the number 15 is really more looking at our local ordinance, not the state, our local ordinance, to see whether there should be different subtypes of level 1 manufacturing with different requirements.
That would have gotten voted on separately and differently than an ethanol specific, I think.
I didn't hear
Potentially. That they would have been voted on differently if it was worded differently, but the people that brought that, or the one that mentioned them that aren't here, weren't very clear.
Got it.
So, but I think this list does show we have like 5 or 6 issues that really are at the top, that are really big ticket items. And before I get into those, the question 2 of ranking cannabis business in order of priority. These are the lists that we would bring to the board to get blessing on if you want to work on. The 2 that I thought, 7 and 8, that scored low, I feel like both of them are addressed in areas above and would potentially recommend dropping those off. I think those really tie into cannabis business plan and cannabis economic development, and don't necessarily need to be a standalone. Cannabis business retention and cannabis business parks, I think, go into components of economic development and a business plan, so I would propose dropping them because they're already within.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make it, okay.
Write a note somewhere so we don't have.
This is Paul. Hi, this is Paul.
Hold on, Paul. Anna's going to go, then you.
There doesn't need to be wording about shared use facilities.
We're on a different stack. I was doing the same thing. We're down here.
You're on the phone.
Yeah.
Question two.
I raised my hand there. I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah, Paul?
Yeah, with regards to the cannabis business plan, I think that 15 and 16 on the above question should fall into that as well, because each situation should be site specific, and when it's reviewed in the business plan as to how you're using your ethanol, since it is allowed in level 1 manufacturing, you just explain that in your business plan, and that takes care of 15 and 16.
Paul, I think that the business plan is not referring to each individual applicant's business plan, but an overall county business plan.
County.
I see.
So that one's most likely, let's see, November 13th. November 13th? What? Is that a Tuesday? November 13th board meeting. During the cannabis update, I'm going to give them an update on the working groups, and I'm going to ask for further direction regarding these 6 items for question 2, and if they will allow the working group to make some recommendations in those areas. So back to question number 1. This is a long list. I would say the top 6, pretty much everything that got 10 points or more seems to be kind of the big ticket items that kind of came to the top. A lot of them are really in-depth, and so what I'd like to propose is that as this group, we tackle one issue at a time and really delve into that issue to either figure out a way we can solve it administratively if we can and not have to do an amendment, and then put together the recommendations. I just don't want it to get to a point where we're talking about 3 different things and then, we don't really get anything accomplished in a timely manner.
And that way, too, staff can
come a little bit more prepared. I don't know if Vandy's on the phone.
No, he's training.
He was reviewing this and had some ideas, and he'll be staffing this, but a way for then staff to become a little bit more prepared for each individual one that we know we're going to address.
So I know like when we're talking about a topic, other subtopics naturally get brought up. And so we could do that thing called a parking lot, meaning I hear you and then we'll just put it in the parking lot, and then when that issue comes up, that good point that was made, come there, up around. So, yeah.
I couldn't hear what she just said.
She said that what we can do as we move through the items is if people decide to talk about items that are unrelated or partially related, we'll put it on the parking lot list, and when we hit that item on this list, we'll bring it back up.
Okay. Thank you.
Is there one of these guys? Corinne?
Okay, so changes to microbusiness at the county level. We have talked about this issue in supervisors meetings and planning commission meetings, I'm thinking, for a couple of years, and we have gotten nowhere. So what avenues do we have to move forward from this group when the message is going to be similar to what has been? How are we going to break through the wall of no, we can't do that? No, we can't have a standalone.
So let me answer that. This is Mary Lynn. I think that we've not always been dealing with Corinne and with cultivation. That is what the board and the planning commission is really focused on. We had like one shot with the non-cultivation stuff, and I think we did one amendment or something. Now, I believe this is where this working group is turning this to looking at the non-cultivation facility stuff that needs to happen. So we've talked about the microbusiness stuff. We've waited for the state. We feel that we've come down some road with it, but we have a lot further to go. So I think this is the track we're on right now.
I think the time has come.
I really do.
And I believe that Andy understands it really well, and I think he has some good ideas, and I think...
And you're under our belt now.
Yeah, we do. And I think this is the time for to tackle it right.
Yeah. And Mary Lynn has been right. It's been primarily focused on cultivation. And I think now that that's farther along and ad hocs reporting out and all that kind of stuff, and staff has a year under the belt, we actually have time to work on this.
And we have state.
And we have some better state direction than when we started this journey in August of 2017.
Yeah.
So can I say something? This is Hannah.
Sure.
First off, I think that what Corinne's point I think is getting to, and I think that was Corinne, but I'm not sure. But I think that what she's talking about is whether or not we're going to be blocked by zoning code issues. And what I would say, Corinne, is 2 things, not only what Mary Lynn and Sarah have said about there being a little bit more time now that we've refined the cultivation stuff more. There's a little bit more time for planning staff and building staff to kind of troubleshoot some of this stuff. But also we have a new PBS director, and he is very interested in, looking at things anew and seeing where we can push things. So while I really appreciate, Corinne, you're keeping your eye on the ball of is this practical for us to even tackle, I think it's worth us seeing how much we can do, and we might be up against limits again in state law that we can't change, like with the building codes or with the zoning codes, and until there's a general plan update and stuff like that. But I think it's still worth us having it as a priority to look at.
And I would just add to that, too. I think it's a good opportunity, now that we have a little bit more time, is like the building requirements group. I think there's a lot that staff and you all can come to a mutual recommendation. And that's ideal, because if staff and this group is coming together on items of mutual recommendation, we will be more successful. I mean, there's probably going to be outliers of things, like in past working groups where they kind of just not comfortable with making that recommendation. But I think there's a lot we can come to an agreement on tweaking certain things and trying to address issues.
Well, we can focus on it. We haven't been able to focus on
microbusiness.
I mean, and they just now are agreeing about taking churches and youth groups off the list. I mean, that was over a decade of my life. So it happens eventually.
Corinne.
I just want to say that
Same with transferability. Finally, they're talking about it.
I think it's a natural progression, because now that cultivation is a little bit more established, the problems that came up at the ad hoc committee on Monday were very clear that farmers are having problems distributing their product, and micro-license can help solve that, and also having cultivators be able to expand, because people are not getting paid from distributors. They're being abused, and especially with small farmers, I really think it's important that micro-license and small distribution and things with co-ops being able to share some of the responsibilities to control how it's actually getting to market, and that includes local manufacturing as well. So I think it's really timely.
Corinne?
So I agree. And my concern from what Sarah had said about let's tackle one thing at a time, if microbusiness is our first choice, and it is by far the most popular one on our list here, how shall we address it, and shall we, as a group, agree that that is our current topic?
Yeah, I would say we need to agree on probably these first 5 ones, that microbusiness is first. And I think what would be beneficial today is maybe do a little brainstorming on some topics that we want to start with looking at. And it would be nice if we kind of knew ahead of time the areas we wanted to address about microbusinesses first, so myself and Sandy and other staff can then do some research and come prepared to sit down and try to hammer these issues out.
I would like to request under that vein of thought that if we are going to attach microbusiness as our main priority for the first topic to address, that we would do what you've done with some of the other topics, merging them, and we address under question number 1, item 6, the requirement to using, is it number 6? Number 9, excuse me, the review for the administrative or the use permit, because I don't see, when it comes to applying for a microbusiness, at one point we talked about that being a use permit application process, and so I kind of see them as maybe going together, that either we say you can apply for it independent of needing a use permit, or we bring in the requirement for a major or minor use permit as part of that, because if we have to get a major or a minor use permit to get our microbusiness, hashing out microbusiness without hashing out whether or not we're going to require a major or minor use permit for that, I don't know if that makes sense.
It's definitely part of it.
It's definitely.
So this review administrative permit or use permit requirements number 9?
9.
Yeah. I'm not even sure really what that's supposed to mean, but that could fall into so many of these things.
Yeah, because essentially it could be a requirement for a number of license types.
It's a hot topic. Yeah. That's a really strenuous process.
It's almost like it's like 1A. It's just part of. It's like I said, part of a lot of these things.
It's a part of a lot of things. It seems like a really big one.
It's not a standalone.
But can I say that the review of administrative and/or use permit requirements I think that in the public meeting the other night and then in my discussion with Brent afterwards, it became clear that he's been given directions to look at all kinds of processes and see how we can make them more efficient and, on the one hand, less onerous, but on the other hand, without compromising the requirements and the obligation to the environment and neighbors. And so I kind of feel like, unless there's something as a working group that we could do to help him in that process, that's kind of on his plate, and maybe we could double check with him, and maybe we don't have to worry about it as a working group topic yet unless he feels it would be valuable for us to help him in some way get data or information or something like that.
I guess my goal would be, quite frankly, yes, I have an agenda in mind bringing that topic up, is that I would love to see if there was going to be a required process of that nature for microbusiness for the small farmer that we lead towards the administrative use and opposed to the major or minor use permit because of what the law is getting now.
And that's what everybody wants, but it really depends on the zoning, and
And your combo.
And that's what you need to look at. I mean, when you talk about the microbusiness stuff, where are we going to put categories?
One of the most complicated, or when things can kind of get elevated is when, depending on your property and where you're doing your business, if you're going to do manufacturing, because it raises it.
So, or if you're going to cultivate.
It's site-specific.
Yeah, it's very
If it's site-specific, microbusiness is broken down on a state level by cash value.
Exactly.
Right? So if you're expecting to do a $2 billion business, it's different than if you're looking at doing a $500,000 business. Could we not adjust our standards in a similar way?
I think what's
not my money.
Yeah, what's unique about it's true, and I would say the unique part about working together here on microbusiness is county regulates land use. The state does not. So the state looks at this as strictly size of business and money. The counties and the cities have an interesting perspective because we determine the land use. So there is a component of what's your zoning, what's the intent of that zoning district. Can you do something out of your home in this district, can you not? So there's a level of discussion that can happen here with the planning team of looking at the microbusiness license type and seeing where we can make it easier, maybe reduce requirements here or there, and what are thresholds in terms of land use that are going to require more review.
Right.
And that, I think, needs a lot of work, but you have to remember that we deal with land use, the state does not.
Right. But I'm just wondering, like you said, scaling. Find some way of scaling it.
We've attempted to, we're not as far as we should be, but that is the goal.
That's the goal.
Thank you.
I just want to make a comment. I think that 5, 8, 9, 10, and 11 could all be combined into one for changes to microbusiness, because they're all kind of related and covered under the umbrella of microbusiness. And they're like subcategories of what microbusiness is about.
But
secondly,
Stuart, there's also some independent aspects to 11. Like 11 is not necessarily a microbusiness.
Oh, yeah.
And 10 is not necessarily a microbusiness. It could be just a retail and not a microbusiness.
I would suggest really that we start with looking at microbusiness. It's going to touch a lot of the other things, but I will say from interactions with the public, there are issues we're seeing from people that are just doing processing and just doing retail and things that they want changed. But to me, I think microbusiness has the most work. It's going to touch a lot of these other things, and I think if we figure that out, then the rest of these things are going to be a lot easier. And talking about co-op processing facilities or changing the way we allow our retailers to do on-site consumption.
I think a lot of these are just going to work themselves out as we get through the microbusiness.
Well, that's what I think.
Categorize them as, we say that one goes under that one, maybe it's going to be hard to stay focused.
I had two
We
other
can't
comments.
hear the last person that spoke.
It was puffing. Andy, then we'll go back to you, Stuart.
Okay.
To me,
Sure. So as it relates to microbusiness, a lot of these issues are going to be tied into microbusiness, but if you're not interested in microbusinesses, they're also very important issues, just probably a different discussion with a different group of people that care about them in different ways. Would we consider splitting the microbusiness discussions off for the people that care about microbusinesses? Because that's it's clearly a really large group of people that I would imagine if you care about microbusiness issues, you may not care as much about the non-microbusiness, non-cultivation functions. I don't know. Microbusiness it's a totally different type of business with different issues associated with it, and
I would hope we could get as a stepping stone for a lot of small farmers that are involved in.
Yeah.
And also,
I'm not debating that at all.
I just think that there's so the microbusinesses, I see those more for the smaller farmers, but then I see we have our larger facility people that their topics are totally different, which include a lot of these things. Is that what I'm getting at?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So it's almost like you almost need, I can see where you could have two different groups going at the same time.
That could be something that you guys decide to want to do. I don't know how you guys feel about subcommittees. They've worked in the past, they haven't worked. I see Corinne's face. Very wrong.
I think.
How many people are wanting to do that? Why don't we just show up hands?
I'm the one that's in the room,
Right?
all those other people didn't show up.
Yeah.
No, it's true.
But on the phone, people are on the phone, and I would say that my reason to not split it up is because in my experience now, since the inception of working groups, is that it starts out the large group and it gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and the people who are doers are actually very few. And if we split it off, then it's going to be hard for those doers to do double time at the same time. I'm going to suggest that we keep the order, but then we do not drop off those other topics, and after we've dealt with them in the context of microbusiness, then we might decide as an ancillary thing during the microbusiness thing that we have to also figure it out as applied to those subtopics, even if it's independent of a microbusiness, or we might shelve it and say, okay, this is how it's going to be dealt with in the context of microbusiness, but we are reserving that topic later on for when it's outside of the context of a microbusiness. Ideally, they should be treated the same, but there may be a reason to have them slightly different.
And what we could do, too, is, I'm not really sure how long it's going to take us to do microbusiness. I don't want to try to set some goals here about how many meetings. But once we get through microbusiness, I know we have this list. You could also go by license type if you wanted to.
As other categories?
Yeah. So, we'll start with microbusiness, hammer that out, move to manufacturing, move to processing, move to distribution, because a lot of these things really fall under issues with categories. Yeah. So maybe if we tackle by license and then kind of look through the list of, do we need to address zoning on this one? Do we need to address tasting rooms on this one? That might be the best way. And maybe
that's a great rate.
Optimistic we can do microbusiness and
people that are interested in working on microbusiness. They're the ones that are going to show up at the working groups. The ones that are the larger facilities, whatever license type that is, they'll show up for those. And then we don't have to worry either about who's missing meetings, because I think people lose interest when you're talking about something that's not affecting them.
And I know from a staff perspective, I would say microbusiness, processing, and it's probably tied between distribution and manufacturing of how many.
I think it's the S license type, which hasn't been touched, and it could really help move our small medicine makers forward.
Mm-hmm. Maybe. I'm just talking about people that are coming in, the most common thing I get.
Yeah, because
about microbusiness and then about processing then I would say it's about tie between distribution and manufacturing. Then retail's last. We rarely get anyone that comes in.
But from an economic standpoint, it's the missing link to the success of the production end, is to have those retail outlets and retail opportunities. So,
oh, I agree. We have a lot.
We have a lot.
They're doing very well.
They're the easy ones.
Comparatively
oh, I see what you're
to other license plates in our county.
No apologies, that's just fabulous.
But yeah, I think that's a great
So
suggestion.
can we agree to maybe looking at it by license type?
Yes.
And we'll start with micro.
I'd love to stay in the group for everything because I see it as a wonderful learning opportunity and expanding understanding, bringing that knowledge back to my community.
What are we going to do after micro business?
What do you want?
Are you
Manufacturing.
Distribution.
I think, processing, it depends on, like all of these, I mean, the big thing is scale, right? Micro-businesses, all of these issues, they're all at a relatively small scale, right, relative to everything else. And the same can be said for processing. If you want to do pre-rolls with your own material in your own space on your residential property, that's one thing. If you want to do 10,000 pre-rolls a day, it's a different one.
But you have to distribute it as well, whatever you make.
I'm thinking maybe we do micro-business, processing, manufacturing, distribution, retail.
Okay.
And it's not all of it, though.
I'd like to see distribution higher up the level.
Yeah. We need to have events and S license types in there because we don't have those.
So S is going to go with manufacturing because it's a shared facility for manufacturing.
Okay. Can it be shared through processing as well?
The different regulatory body. So the S type is California Department of Public Health, and it's manufacturing.
Uh-huh.
So that particular license, so, I mean, I think the shared facilities for processing is going to happen when we talk about processing.
Or cooperatives.
I'd like to see distribution higher up the level because it's really critical.
We can agree on manufacturing first, and we can agree on processing second. Maybe we start there and revisit it when we finish processing.
Yeah, I think like, okay.
And can I?
Then we can argue
suggest
who's going to
that
go
we're-
first.
One of the problems is that we've already dealt with, but not entirely completely, the requirements for the structures. And so people need to be clear that while we're going through these topics, the building requirements working group dealt with trying to fix some of the issues with the structures. There's still the issue of how to deal with the building permitting of processing on somebody's farm, but that's different than a processing license. You don't need a processing license if you're only processing the material from that farm under your license. You do need a processing license if you're going to have more than one of your farms processing at one location or you're processing for others. But that's a separate issue than the structures that are required and whether or not it's F1 occupancy or U occupancy or something else.
Right, that's a totally different,
Yeah.
that's been dealt with.
Yeah, that's the delta. We're strictly talking about processing facilities. And it goes back to a lot of people wanting to scale or doing a shared model or some other weird provisions about multiple licenses at different locations and wanting to use one facility and la-di-da-di-da. We can go on. But I think we can agree on micro-business and then processing. Then when we get to processing, we'll decide if manufacturing comes before distribution.
Yeah, I think we agree.
Or if distribution comes first.
And then know where we are going.
I think distribution covers everything, and manufacturing covers one aspect. And I think distribution is a very big problem in our county.
What is the problem with distribution? Because we allow distribution of your product, so I'm not
Almost
sure.
anywhere now.
Yeah, so why is it a topic that we need to address?
I think it's an issue how the distributors are behaving.
The distributors are terrible. I mean, I don't know if you're at the Monday meeting, but they were.
I know,
But we don't, that's not something we can control.
we're talking about zoning and our ordinance.
Yeah.
So we've expanded a lot of distribution in terms of allowing cultivators to do self-distribution, transportation. So that's what I'm talking about, is changes to that model we have.
Right.
Not necessarily there being a good business owner.
If you think it's adequate as it is, then I'm okay. I just think it's really.
I don't
We agree, it's important, but it's not, I don't think, in the scope of what we're doing here to be able to deal with it.
I don't think it's holding anyone up. I guess that's my concern. I think everyone's able to do it.
We have probably more inquiries about people that are interested in manufacturing and trying to figure out how, than some of the minor issues of, can I do this to transport or this to sell,
Right.
that.
I have a question about item number 3, which says expanding allowed facilities in RAND land.
Range.
Okay, so I need to protest that because I've had a lot of conversations with Devin from the Farm Bureau about farmers feeling left out. And it's not just range land, it should be resource land, which includes FL and TPZ. And I know that John is like trying to push range land, but I think that needs to be pushed back because it's excluding the people who are legal in our county who didn't happen to grow before January 2016, January 1st, 2016, they were following the law, and if they're on FL or TPZ, they're excluded. And that's just not fair, and it's not...
Come out of the ad hoc report. That's what you guys heard the other night.
I understand, but the ad hoc...
I don't think it's something we can actually even deal with here as far as expanding your facility. This is about facilities, it's not about cultivation. So I think you're talking more about cultivation, Stuart, and that's come out of the ad hoc. That's not something we can address.
Okay. And one other point I wanted to make before, and that's okay. On the micro license, I've heard talk about major use permit. And I've personally been through a major use permit application, and I just want to make a statement that I'm going to say is very strong, is major use permit will not work for micro business. It's way too much. And it will, and looking at other counties that have that, they're failing to be able to process them. It's just way too much, and there has to be a way to make it easier. A major use permit is extremely serious. And it's not going to work. And I'm not going to say that's my opinion. I know it's not.
That's something we need to talk about when we talk about microbusiness.
Right, we're talking about.
Yeah.
So maybe now that we've determined we're doing microbusiness first, I think what might be beneficial is if we can get some bullet points of some things you want to delve into regarding microbusiness, so then when we come back in December, all of the staff can be prepped and we can start to work on this. All right.
Microbusiness should be a standalone license. It should not be tied to cottage industry, home occupation issues. It should be a standalone business, and it should be evaluated for the functions within the license type on a particular property.
Can I ask a question, Corinne?
Sure.
So it's my understanding that the only time that, let's say, either the manufacturing component or the distribution component is tied into the cottage industry and home occupation rules, which is a planning rule, not and a zoning code section, not a business license section, is when you are trying to do those activities, whether it's part of a microbusiness or not. If you're doing those activities in conjunction with your cultivation site, which is how the board has expanded and planning and building has expanded the ability for people to do those activities on places that otherwise wouldn't be zoned for it, is it that it's an accessory use of your cultivation license. And so when you're trying to do that, then the only way that they could do an accessory use is if it fit within home occupation or cottage industry, which has certain building size limits for that activity, and that otherwise it's not restricted in the right kind of zoning. It's just when you're on zones that otherwise wouldn't allow that activity, the only way they were able to make this happen quickly without a general plan amendment is to make it an accessory use. Does that make sense? So if you were on industrial property, obviously you wouldn't have a problem.
And that's correct, Hannah. This is Mary Lynn. So, yes, And I understand what Corinne's getting at, that how we could fit it into our existing zoning. That's how it worked. That's how we got it in there to begin with. So now, do we need to take a look at it differently? That's what we can do. So to add it in.
And that's what I'm suggesting.
Right.
Because what we have confronted from day one of regulation is trying to make this industry fit into something where it never existed before. And I believe that we need new avenues rather than just, pigeonholing and round peg in square hole analogy. So
I agree. And I think that what we should do is have one of our primary recommendations that we're making to the board, the necessity to do a general plan update, if that is the only avenue to expand beyond, first, as Mary Lynn and you are saying, first we review, well, is there anything else that we can do to help given the current zoning codes? And then beyond that, one of our recommendations is to also encourage the board of supervisor to engage in a painful process of another general plan update so that we're not trying to fit a round peg in a square hole. But I think it's a two-step thing. One is there anything else we can do currently? And then secondly, make the strong recommendation that we have to update these things because otherwise we're stuck with trying to fit things in a way that's not effective.
This is Paul.
Paul, 1 second. We're going to get to you. We have one speaker before you. Speak loud because you're far from the mic.
This is Tracy, and this is from my perspective, is that because we are such a unique little county with different things here and there, and I know that this is the most popular, but I do feel it's site-specific. Like, we got to know what you're doing on your place. And maybe we have a white paper that the person takes back with them with a check sheet, with in concurrence with our municipal value system. Are they doing this? Where's their discharge? Where's this? Where's that? What's going on? And then it's done. No matter where they are, no matter what zone they are, it's just site-specific. That the zoning's out, all that stuff is out. It's just, are you doing it right? And then you get eyes on it, and then, that's my recommendation.
Isn't that an administrative use permit?
Well, I don't know, but I just know that somebody, I believe, should have
Depends on what they're doing.
what's going on, yeah.
And every zone is different.
And then once you have it, you're done though. And then you're in the thing, maybe you get checked on once a year just to make sure or whatever, but you're done. Yeah.
I agree with something along those lines. And I think that by the time we get down to how to issue both to the cultivators some kind of sustainability permit for future use, for ownership, flexibility, and all those things, but this type of licensing should be reviewed in the same way. There should be a joint checklist between ag and building, so that one inspector is able to survey the scene, be familiar with what's necessary to review, and you don't need both agencies, you don't need the state, you need somebody responsible with their checklist, with a background to observe and evaluate.
Yeah, that's all we need.
Comprehensive community.
It's probably
So that's great, but we're getting off topic.
Yeah.
Well, this
is where we want to direct our county processes.
No, but what I'm saying is we're supposed to, so is that a bullet point we wanted to put on here? That's what we're trying to find is some bullet
So
points.
micro-business,
So we have standalone license. So what do you want to put that one as?
Standalone license, criteria for compliance.
protocol.
Okay.
Streamline protocol.
Paul?
Protocol, yeah.
Yeah, hi.
Paul?
Hi, yes, I'm here. Microbusiness has been, the flagship for me for activism for a very long time. Susan and I actually started to do something about it. I don't know, I sent it out to the entire list at one point. I don't know if anyone had a chance to review that. It started out as a home occupation license, and we turned it in because we found out that the Bureau would be more amenable to a cottage microbusiness license. because what the Bureau did with the microbusiness license on the state level is just obscene. It's just ridiculous. So for the small farmer, this is something that we put together, and I would love to get some feedback. I can resend it from to the mailing list again, but it's in legislative council right now, and I should have the first draft from them before the next week, or the next meeting.
I'd love for him to resend it, though. I know I've received it once, but I want to dig for it.
Can you send it to Karen, Paul?
Send it to Karen? Yeah, sure.
Yes.
I'm definitely interested.
Other bullet points?
I'm sorry, say it again.
I said other bullet points. I see.
I think going from a minor or major use permit, if we can, go to the other administrative, thank you, that's what we.
So let me just back up. When you say going from a minor to a major, do you know the difference between them?
I would not claim to know that if I was you.
I guess my thing is the only difference between the two is the hearing body.
Right.
So there's a little bit of fee
and the
difference,
price.
but not. So there's the administrative permit process, and then there's a minor major use permit, which could go either way. But
the administrative use permit is where
The public hearing.
so right now it depends on what you're doing. So and what zoning you are. So, Corinne.
Well, I believe that if we have a consensus that there is a pathway to an administrative permit, particularly based on the fact that we have these other 25 agencies who are opining on us anyway, and it's not just a county use. We are regulated by so many environmental concerns already that if we are passing with all these other agencies, our own county should make it easier for us to be in compliance with a permitted use. And it shouldn't require the months, the time, wrangling up your neighbors with a hearing. There's so many things that make it reasonable to be administrative.
I agree. My concern is then we have to talk, when you talk about it, you've got to talk about different levels, because when you include manufacturing and microbusiness, that means something to you, but that means something totally different to him. And that's why we have to make sure that we have different levels, and maybe one's administrative, maybe one's a major. That's what we have to take a look at.
I can understand that.
Okay.
I mean, I'm thinking of the most simplistic qualification for micro at this point in time. That's my point.
I kind of have two things here. So I have pathway to administrative permit rather than a use permit for microbusiness, and maybe looking at thresholds when it comes to permits, and taking a look at where we put those thresholds. So I'm going to put that below, looking at thresholds for permitting.
Your language, minor use permit and administrative permit are still permits. It's the way you stated it. Just wanted to correct the language.
We just said pathway to use administrative permits rather than use permits. And then we're going to...
Both use permits.
No, an administrative permit is different than a use permit.
There's a minor or a major use permit, so there's
administrative permit.
Okay.
Real quick question. I just want to clarify something for what's acceptable. My understanding, because I'm not the biggest supporter of this, I wouldn't want my neighbors setting up a giant butane lab on my property. Now, that's limited to being on an industrial parcel. Therefore, I would assume that's not a consideration for a microbusiness. Am I correct in that?
I would think so, but I haven't looked at it in a while.
Right, and so some of the more dangerous elements of things that I would say cause problems in the community are already ruled out. So when we're looking at the options of what would be getting developed in the micro license, it is the less harmful or less intimidating processes that one can use. Right?
Yes.
Just want to make sure that I'm understanding that correctly. We're looking at non-threatening development types.
Is there something, I mean, I know this is probably way outside the box, but zoning exempt, like something that's like, I mean. No. Zoning exempt, no.
Every parcel in this county has a zone.
What about the cottage permit?
I don't know. I'm not exempt.
No, every single parcel in the county has a zoning applied to it.
Oh, no, I understand that, but I mean, I thought there was more flexibility under us.
Oh, possibly, I don't know.
You mean for shared facilities? Are you talking about the state's shared facilities for manufacturing?
Yeah, that's just for manufacturing. It's more of it's to follow the model of a full-on.
Commercial sharing, yeah.
Instead of a small. But what about, if the county already has a process for a home-based business, they already have a process for these different levels of business. Why do we have to be so out of line with what that is?
We're not.
We're not, okay. I'd be dead.
So I'll throw this out. You have your site, your grow site, you have your processing, you have what is just the manufacturing there, but you don't live there.
Oh.
That's not
like a lot of vineyards, for example.
Oh. So that's what that's what you're getting at. With your home occupation, you live there. A cottage industry, you live there.
Okay.
That's one of the requirements for doing, and that applies to whether you're doing, processing honey from bees or whatever. It's all, that's where it falls into. But that's what we have.
So we have conflict. The cottage micro, and then, you put the cottage micro, and then just the micro. Cottage micro.
That would be another topic. You got to, right now, our zoning, the way it's set up is you've got to live there. You've got to live there. So
I'm hearing you talk about tiered micro businesses.
Then you can do, wineries, our wineries have had an open door for forever, because when our ordinance was written, we only had like maybe 2 or 3 wineries in our county. So,
now.
Yeah.
Are you saying to have a micro business license, you have to live there, or a cottage?
A home occupation or a cottage industry, you have to live on site, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to just recap what I have so far. Microbusiness should be a standalone license, not tied to cottage or home occupation. And as a side note, taking a look at new avenues for microbusinesses and whether a general plan amendment is needed. Expanding zoning, looking more at criteria for compliance or site-specific criteria. Pathway to administrative permit rather than using a use permit for microbusiness, and with that, looking at thresholds for when to apply which permit. And then looking at a tiered microbusiness system, so you have like a cottage micro and a regular micro.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Is there anything, and Julie, just to catch you up, microbusiness we're going to tackle first. So what we're doing is putting together kind of a bullet point of some specifics we want to review. So that way we all have time to go back and put together our thoughts, our concerns. Staff has time to prep for the next meeting. Okay. Any other big ticket items or big bullet points you want for the conversation in December?
Well, I think that maybe we're going to have to, each of us, contemplate whether there are other subtopics of microbusiness that need to be flushed out. I don't think, and again, I think it's just a matter of what's going on, being in the middle of the comment period for the regs and these new deadlines for state temporaries and everything else, that I know I haven't had time to sufficiently contemplate it the way I would like to. So I just want to keep that avenue open, that it's not like, okay, now we're limited to these subtopics and that's it. I think we should do what makes sense.
So what I'm thinking is we'll go over these at the next meeting, and then our next steps we'll put something like, are we missing anything? Anything else we didn't think of that needs to be included? Because I have a feeling we're going to be talking about microbusinesses. My guess is for at least 3 meetings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you.
Chris has talked about all the variables that I'm thinking about right now. Ones that matter and ones that don't.
Because pretty much Bandy will be here. I'll see if Brent can be here too in December. And maybe we'll be lucky and we'll have it pushed out in December and January.
Notes from this meeting that will be going around, Chris, to figure out everybody's mind.
Great.
Okay, I will get that.
It will be on our webpage probably next week. Mm-hmm. Any other last-minute items we want to add to the list in our remaining
Sarah, I have
14 minutes?
more of a comment. I'm not sure, but is this committee or could this committee work on ways to protect people who make significant investments in a micro business, where that even though you meet the zoning and you meet the requirements and all that, let's just say your neighbors decide that after you've done all this, that they don't want you to have that micro business. Is this committee able to put in some regulations, some safeguards to say, well, just because the neighbors now want to opt out of the micro business or the cottage industry, then all those investments that these people made are just gone? Is that something that we can put down to say, okay, if somebody gets a micro business license, if they meet the other requirements, obviously when they come out and do the inspections, you're not dumping.
So that right there is a very loaded question because there's the opt-in and opt-out process going for cultivation.
Right.
And the board is very heavily involved with that in the planning commission.
Right.
So I would say that's probably outside of this scope. Okay. I would be happy to welcome you saying those comments when we take these recommendations to the board.
Right.
But
that'll be for those people that are going to do. I'm not saying I'm going to open a micro business, but I just think
just based on what's going on with, we don't know the outcome of opt-in or opt-out, and that's going before the board on November 16th. I don't think we should tackle that or talk about that at this point because there's so many questions that I don't know what's going to happen on November 16th and what precedents may be set or not set.
But I just wanted to add that repeatedly for a long time, we questioned some of the verbiage in these ordinances that have to do with sensitive receptors and how it's defined with, a large number of people who are expressing something negative about permittee or something, and how it's a complaint-driven county and you may not get any enforcement help if somebody hasn't, registered the proper complaint. It's not as simple as what common sense should bear out, and we don't have it even well defined in the ordinance as it is right now. I mean, who is a sensitive receptor? How many sensitive receptors does it take to validate a complaint?
I don't have an answer for that. I know a lot of that really is closely tied to cultivation, a lot of those issues, and I just don't think that this is an avenue yet. I think we need to focus on I think we need to focus on
and goes nowhere.
I think we need to
help the county people make more investments in this county if they had something to say, wow, just because the neighbor goes, I don't want to go your hair anymore. Or your race or whatever it is that
I hear your concerns, but with the opt-in and opt-out process going on, a lot of unknowns. We don't know what their decision are. We don't know what the precedence is going to be, and we have specifically charged to look at this ordinance for amendments and focus on microbusiness first. We need to stick to that. Julia?
Yeah, and Sarah's spot on there. I think the place to go with those concerns, and many people have them. And many important people have them. The local attorney has them, who is agent and has a neighborhood doing similar things, Chris, and lying. That you really need to talk to the board about this. And that would be what, November 6th, there's a presentation?
November 16th, and we don't want to get to a situation like we got with transferability that completely derails the group.
So my question is that if we get away from the marijuana industry and we go into business practices in general, is there already a pre-established routine that protects businesses that open up in Mendocino and their investments? Has that ever been a topic? Like, if I open up a coffee shop, is it something I would have to worry about my neighbor shutting me down?
There was that whole issue with the city of Ukiah with coffee critics before it became Black Oak because they wrote their own.
I would say no, and I would say in general the county has not focused heavily on economic development ever. It may change in the future because we do have a new planning director whose background is tied to community and economic development, but traditionally that hasn't been a primary focus on the board. Not that that could change, and I would suggest just in general for people that are interested in business development and economic development that what Julia says is correct. The Board of Supervisors needs to hear that feedback from the county because when we start dealing into areas that aren't directly tied to the mission of this group, we will get derailed.
Could we parking lot it for question 2, number 2, economic development?
I think those lists right here, this is going to the board. I'm going to talk to this question 2 on November 13th, and they're either going to say yes or they're going to say no.
Right, but
and then if they say yes, then we can tackle it. Until we have a clear yes, the board says, go ahead and look at this, and then once they get a yes or a no, you're also going to want to think, what are you going to prioritize first? Is it more important for you to see changes in microbusiness or a business plan? So you're going to have to do another internal prioritization because, you know, we're only 13 people and 2 to 4 staff every meeting, so you've got to think too, you know, this is a long list. I mean, this could take a long time, so you got to think, what is the most important things to be tackled and what's going to give you the most payoff and what you can actually get through quicker.
Well, aren't we on the wave of this economic development meeting are occurring? Is there an economic development meeting coming up?
On the 6th, there'll be a presentation by West Company, or whatever their new name is, and EDFC with the county. And I believe the county is moving towards a direction of this is going to be a topic that's discussed more, but it's hard to say what the outcome will be. But if you're interested in economic development, it's probably a meeting you want to attend.
So there we go.
So I do feel like one of the main things, underlying things, that we're going from a resource-based county to a tourism county. Like we're totally changing our whole, like, we're changing up the whole wall. And so that transition of just that we keep repeating that we're changing from a research-based to a tourism-based, and that's going to be such a shift in our priorities and like how we do business and everything. And it could be really fun in some ways, but I think it'll be challenging. But I think if we just keep it as a, you know, about like the eye on the side of everything, just the streamlining of it. And I think micro businesses are just super in alignment with the tourism-based, you know, new kind of place that we're headed.
Maybe as part of our micro-business development, we could bullet point an appeals process if you run into a no or...
So we're going to talk about ministerial permits and permits that require planning. So if you have an administrative permit, a major permit, or a minor use permit, there's an appeal process. When it's a ministerial permit, you either meet the requirements or you don't. There's not an appeal process. So it kind of depends. Once you look at the license types and the thresholds of when you may need a ministerial or when you may need a use permit or an administrative permit, that kind of that details your outcome. So if you have an administrative or a use permit, there is an appeal process. And ultimately the appeals can end up at the Board of Supervisors.
So it is a home-based occupation, is that a ministerial permit, or is it?
I don't believe so, but I mean, Mary Ellen's not here, but in the zoning chart, when you can look at, it's like, for instance, if you're doing cottage industry, there's a higher level. So that's one thing when we get to talk about pathway to administrative permit or looking at thresholds, determining what type of permit are you getting determines your course of action if you're denied.
So
that's coming when we're talking about which businesses are going to have which permitting pathways. And what that entails.
About it when we were talking about the scope of it.
Because we've had that with cultivation, but those that are in ministerial permits, they're ministerial.
Is the cultivation permit ministerial?
Yes.
Yeah, most of them.
No.
There's no appeal process.
No. The only ones that would have some type of appeal would be on the land use side, which isn't the ag permit.
Thank you for clarity.
So when I'm told to be there between 1:30 and 3:30.
That will be an afternoon item.
The November 16th?
Yeah, I'd love to, because, Carmela said to get a hold of Mary Ann and give her input on the cannabis thing, but I could never get a phone call back from her. So what you gonna do?
Can you repeat the date of that meeting?
We contract with both West Company and EDFT for economic development services.
If those contracts come out, are they open for bidding?
I don't know, but you can PRA the county to get a copy of them.
PRA.
Public records request. Hannah, the economic development presentation's November 6th in the afternoon.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay, any last comments before we end? Because we're at 4:57.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll see you on December 6th.
The county's lucky to have you there.
We all are.
Exactly, we're the county.
We're the county. Hi, we're the county?
I personally feel like I am part of this.
Is that going to be for both meetings?
Thanks, everybody.
First Thursday of every month. Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody, and thank you again, Sarah. Your efforts are wildly appreciated.